Time to abandon ship.
Oh no!
Here we go.
Can I persuade you to join us for a drink? It's a tradition.
Here, here.
Jar Jar, homie, my main man, quickly. Before the Separatists attack, get into the escape pod.
Hey! This is escape, then we're the pod.
Hope you guys are doing well, and welcome back to Star Wars Escape Pod. I'm your host, Josh, and we have Blake joining us today. Blake is our co-host on the show, and we're going to be reviewing the second episode of The Bad Batch for you guys. Just chatting about it, speculating on future episodes. Of course, we look forward to our complete after show down the road with Diego, who's going to transition into that one when he can. But in the meantime, we have these weekly reviews for you guys. Getting caught up slowly on the show. Hopefully, guys, you've been enjoying it as well. I know I have. Let's get into it with Blake and chat all about this second episode in the Bad Batch series.
Another happy landing.
All right, welcome back into the Escape Pod, Mr. Blake.
Hello there. Yep, always good. Thanks for having me.
Always good to have you back. We have our second review of this series now.
Mm-hmm.
And unlike the first episode, which was a lot longer, running at 70 minutes, this one was shorter, but still not 22 minutes. You know, that's something I really like about these Disney Plus animated shows, and what they did with Clone Wars Season 7 was that they tacked on those extra 10 minutes to make it like a rough 30 minutes or so of an episode.
I didn't even notice.
Yeah.
I was looking at timestamps.
It's been cool because I feel like the episode benefits a lot from having just those additional extra couple minutes, you know?
I bet you if I go back and watch one episode on television, original Clone Wars, it'll feel short.
I bet you, yeah, because it's an extra 10 minutes, and there's a lot that you can do in an extra 10 minutes with storytelling that I think before might have been a challenge for Dave, mm-hmm. and the reason why they did these 3-part story arcs, as well as in Star Wars Rebels, which didn't have the arcs, it felt very disjointed at times because you had all these little one-shot stories, and just it was an overarching story, but it wasn't like you had this detailed 3-episode, hour-long story on a planet of a campaign or whatever.
I guess,
right? Yeah.
As long as it suits the story, I'm all for it. Because I do find when you're working with a 22-minute block, a lot of stuff will get cut that probably shouldn't have been, or is just better to keep for flow reasons. Mm-hmm. So being able to actually get in the extra, story, I think will go a long way. So I'm very much on board for that. But at the same time, if it doesn't need that extra and then you just get filler, then because it can kind of go either way depending on what story is being told. So
yeah, for sure. This episode being called Cut and Run, second episode in this first season, is a bit of an interesting one.
Hopefully that's not what us fans will do to the series.
Yeah.
Cut and run.
Hopefully, cut and run. I hope Disney doesn't cut and run on this season, man. I hope we get a follow-up. If it's not designed to just be one season of a show, I hope we do get some sort of second season if it's intended to be that way. But I'd like
would think so. If Star Wars Resistance got 2 seasons, I think Bad Batch can get 2 seasons.
Oh yeah, totally. I think if they can make it fly with Resistance, Bad Batch at least deserves 3. not to say that Resistance sucks. I just wasn't the biggest fan of it. I know you really liked it a lot more than I did.
I heard the ratings were bad. That's the only reason why I say that. I didn't actually enjoy it. It was, you kind of had to expect the age, kind of target age going into it, but I enjoyed it. I like a lot of those old cartoons, similar to the 90s.
You do, yeah.
So
right. Yeah, totally. Yeah. But feeling cheaper.
Well, it is what
like
it is.
the 3D animated. It's just 3D
I didn't mind
animated
it. It's the
aspect
cell
of it.
shaded, the 2D. I didn't mind that.
Yeah.
Just sometimes it's kind of janky. I thought it worked better with the characters than the vehicles, but
Yeah.
overall, I would have preferred a proper 2D. I always prefer 2D to 3D, and it's just an aesthetic choice. So I like the old Clone Wars cartoons, but
What I like about these animated shows is that they fill in a lot of the gaps, and that's like, it's not the main reason to like them, but at the same time, even though I wasn't the biggest fan of Resistance, nor am I a big fan of the sequel films, I did like that Resistance filled in a lot of these. Weirdly enough, being in a kids show of all things, they filled in a lot of the political gap, which was missing from the films, and I actually liked that a lot because it gave me an idea for the relationship and the tension between the First Order and the New Republic, and how the New Republic and the Resistance relationship was as well. Because when you watch episode 7, it just goes by so fast, you know. And then the New Republic is blown up. It's like, what is the New Republic? Like you spend like 20 minutes watching this movie and then it's gone, right? And all you get as far as context is like things that the characters say, which is very, very little as far as political speech, as well as the opening crawl, and that's it. It's like,
yeah, you could tell
boom,
they really
done.
wanted to rush to quickly set up the same feeling that you got from the original trilogy, right? Where you're in this rebellion. But they had to get you there first. And
that's the thing, is like they wanted to make it feel like that, but then there wasn't an ongoing rebellion, right? Whereas episode 4, it's like you are in the midst of this galactic civil war, something that rebels have started doing their thing a couple of years prior. You know, and you know, now that we have Rebels and Rogue One and stuff, we get that more clear picture as to how that whole thing started. But with the New Republic and the Resistance, it's like there was this tense relationship and this Cold War almost. And,
it was, that's how I describe it.
And then episode 7 is really where it starts. And then you have episode 8 following, and then a year later, episode 9 caps it all off. It's like this entire, what was supposed to be this grand finale of a galactic scale war was all within the events of like a year almost, as far as the notable things.
Just dawned on me right now. So I never thought about this until you mentioned it right now. But if you think of the sequel trilogy as the Cold War leading up to it, it actually is. I bet you they use that as a reference, because that's actually extremely fitting, because, you know, it's the same Cold War as the States and Russia between the First Order and the New Republic up to the point of The Force Awakens, where there's kind of like microaggressions, but it's not really a full open war, right? One's waiting for the other to kind of pull the trigger. And when we show up, it was essentially Russia sending over their nukes to America, or vice versa.
Yeah, it was if the Cuban Missile Crisis actually didn't go as it did right now, we would probably have a nuclear scale war back then, right?
Yeah.
Like when maybe neither of us would have been born. Who knows, right? So it's like they took that idea, and episode 7 with Starkiller Base was that failed nuclear missile thing. You know, that's something that never worked out. Like the First Order actually went forward with their plans and blew up the New Republic. So to kind of get back to what I was saying, I was just like, I like these animated shows in the sense that it fills in a lot of these gaps. And Bad Batch is now filling in a gap, which not to say that it hasn't been filled in before. Obviously, Star Wars Legends is a vast place of storytelling. Yeah. But as far as the canon goes, we've really only had some comic books that take place in there. Jedi Fallen Order takes place 5 years after the events of Episode 3.
You kind of argue Solo, but it's also pretty late in that timeline.
Solo's also 5 years after.
Yeah.
Solo takes place in the same year Jedi Fallen Order does. So it's very like this 5-year absence of there's very little, right? There's very little novels, very little comics that take place in these 5 years. And now we have a new animated show that's supposed to kind of tell us how the Empire really becomes prominent, right? Becomes a source of...
But early, which is, to me, one of the most interesting parts. Because we're now seeing that transition of these heroes and these clones into stormtroopers.
Mm-hmm. That's I think was something that a lot of people have always wondered about and always pondered, like, oh, how did this happen, and this and that. And a lot of these fan theories, at least the theories that I've had, which I don't know if they've been worked into books or whatever, which is why these thoughts are in my head, but I've always thought like, oh, they stopped making clones because they wanted to involve the people of the galaxy a lot more to really work them into the system, right?
Yeah. And they are
not
touching on that, which is cool.
Yeah, they are. They actually touched on that. I think it was in this episode.
First episode. Yeah.
Or
just
was it in
talking
the
to
first
Tarkin,
episode?
I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it was one of the first two, but they talked about how implementing volunteers into the system would help bring more allegiance, and and that's kind of what the whole, it's like clones are only obeying these orders now because of this chip right in their head, which I think for Tarkin is a bit of a worrisome idea, because he's thinking like, well, if the chips don't work, or if they find a way around it, like there could go our entire military force.
Yeah, so true.
Yeah, and so like
we already know that can happen. So
yeah, exactly. Plus, they've already got the idea of like, okay, the Empire, the galaxy's at peace. Now we can afford to have like roofs over our volunteers' heads and give them food and everything like that. That was something that stuck out to me a lot in one of the more recent episodes with these volunteers talking about, it's like, hey, I'm volunteering for the Empire, and at least they're treating me better than the Republic did, right?
No, that's true. And
that's all an illusion.
And the thing that Tarkin really points out is that they're much cheaper, significantly cheaper.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, because they're paying just some schmuck and not like for a science experiment.
Yeah, and we didn't talk about this last episode, or like we were talking about the opening movie. But Tarkin specifically points out that the contract that the Kaminoans had for cloning was with the Republic, and now the Republic doesn't exist. So that's kind of the Empire's excuse to stop making clones.
Yeah, it is. It's a good out. It's a good way of
it's really
outing the
screwing
contract.
Kamino over.
Oh yeah, a lot. Yeah, I would not be surprised if this is potentially gonna play into the plot later on in the season when the Kaminoans start to maybe make their own clone army and to fight off some of the Imperial forces,
like in the EU. That'd be cool.
Yeah, like in the EU. Yeah,
Clone rebellion. Or like a civil war.
Or even to see Tipoca City destroyed, because I mean we haven't really seen too much of other parts of Kamino. It would be interesting to see if anything goes down there that just ruins the clone facility, because by the time of the Mandalorian, there's some sort of science-y cloning aspect happening there with the child and the scientist that we've seen with the cloning badge on his sleeve, the doctor with the glasses. Yeah, so he's in the same line of work, and he's not operating on Kamino, right? So
no, I'm sure there is different groups of cloners, but if Palpatine's already worked with the Kaminoans, you think he would have them connected to it in some way, unless they have been wiped out.
Right.
More likely they were wiped out.
More likely they were wiped out. When I get an upgraded gear, sweet, I'm gonna have a hotkey just press that.
Boom, just Samuel Jackson.
Yeah. Or who was it? It was the actor who played Captain Panaka.
Oh, okay,
yeah. I forget his name now. More likely they were wiped out.
Okay, I know what that line's from now. Yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, let's start on the list of things that you kind of noted down in this episode. If you got,
I jotted a few things down. I was watching it, just some things that stood out. And this one I actually wanted to bring up last time, but there's other stuff like was more important. What the heck is with the opening font? It's so bad. I don't know if anyone's talked about this, but the font choice. So it's like Star Wars Bad Batch, right? The title card looks great. And then they show the episode card with the title for this specific episode. And it's like Times New Roman, or like default like Microsoft Word. This looks awful.
I actually didn't notice that.
It's really bad.
I'll pay attention to the next one.
It's like they couldn't afford anything else.
Maybe it's just an editing mistake or something.
No, it's been all 3 episodes so far.
Are you serious?
It's terrible.
Not even noticed. Oh man. That's not good. Yeah. Creative choice, I guess.
Yeah, use like Impact or something. This looks so bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was worth bringing up.
You listening, Dave?
We're speaking to you or the editor, whoever's doing this. Like,
yeah, actually, Dave's a little less involved with this show, but
I was kind of wondering about that. It still says like not directed, but like what was it, artistically driven or something?
Yeah, Dave is an executive producer on this show.
Yeah.
The directors are supervising director is Brad Rao, and Brad Rao is actually the same guy who did Resistance. Ironically enough,
really?
He did a large amount of. Well, he was part of the art department.
Okay,
and he did direct 7 of the episodes.
How do you feel
He was also
about that?
director. Oh, he's a director on Rebels for 5, Forces of Destiny. He did 3. So he's one of the newer guys involved there. The fact that he's already a supervising director, I mean,
is that for the whole show or just this episode?
That's for. I believe this is for the whole show.
Oh, wow.
So this will be his first entire show that he's been the overhead guy. Yeah,
that's pretty good. That's moving up the chain pretty quick.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't like to judge too quickly. So far, the show's been great, even though I wasn't a big fan of Resistance stuff, and it's like that was geared for a younger audience. So, I mean, so far, Bad Batch has been pretty good. Yeah. I mean, I'm impressed so far.
Yeah, I am too.
I don't
it feels like Clone Wars, which is awesome.
Yeah, it does. It just feels like Clone Wars continued, which is
exactly what we wanted.
It's a dream come true. Yeah, it's exactly what we wanted. Yeah.
Yeah, no, so true. I'm very happy with where this is going.
Yeah.
So we have our cats from episode 2 from the arena.
Yes, the Nexu. Yes. The Nexu, the show up again. And actually, it's worth noting. I think a big part of what sticks out about this episode is Cut Laquaid. The Nexu is, well, if you want to talk about the Nexus, they're I guess a big part of the planet that they're on, which is
I was wondering that.
Saleucami? Is it Saleucami or
I didn't write it down.
Okay, well, it's wherever Cut was last seen in season 2 of Star Wars: The Clone Wars. This is the episode called The Deserter.
Yeah.
Where Captain Rex gets shot off a speeder, and a couple of the clones kind of bring him to this abandoned, what looks like a farm, and this Twi'lek wife steps out and brings him into the barn kind of thing. And I guess Cut Laquaid, who's a clone who deserted the clone army, is out hunting or whatever he's doing, and he comes back late at night and basically comes face to face with himself, which is Rex. And they have a lot of debates while he's there healing as to kind of why he left the army. And he's got his reasonable reasons. But again, like, I thought
one thing that stood out to me that was extra neat about that specific episode is it's really early in the Clone Wars.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's really early on, and years later, now we're getting this character come back, which is really, really cool. And I've always liked Cut Laquaid because he is a very key moment of Rex's life, because he's the guy that literally plants the seed in Rex's mind that clones are not just take orders and do them.
Yeah.
Cut Laquaid was the guy who planted the seed in Rex's mind that being a good soldier means sometimes just doing what you believe is right. And that is the reason why they're so much more superior than droids that just blindly follow orders, right?
Yeah,
and
for
in
sure.
an ironic way, how stormtroopers are supposed to be as well, right? And so Cut is the guy that really gives him that idea and almost a hope that Rex will be able to do something with his life when the Clone Wars ends. And in that finale to season 7, when he's standing there next to the Y-Wing and looking at all the fields of helmets like that Ahsoka and him have buried all their, all his brothers basically.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I think like, oh, maybe that's something that really sticks in his mind is meeting Cut Laquaid. And it turns out that that's exactly what happened, because when the Bad Batch group goes there to his farm, he actually tells them, like, I saw Rex not long ago.
Yeah, he said he passed through.
He passed through. Yeah, it's like Cut was the first guy that he went and saw after he parted ways with Ahsoka after the finale of the Clone Wars.
Which is crazy.
I thought that was very, very interesting.
Yeah, and that actually led me directly into a question that I had for you is, does that mean Rex is already deserter?
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say that if he's not already a deserter, he's thinking about it and playing it safe and perhaps faking his allegiance to this new empire.
Yeah.
In a way, because
He
in
doesn't
Rebels,
have the
we
chip.
did.
He's one of the few without it.
Yeah,
now.
he got it taken out. Yeah, and so like in Rebels, though, he does say that they're in this retired state where they report stuff to the Empire and they just kind of leave them alone.
See, that's the
right?
thing that makes me so confused, because we have that from Rebels where he says they're quote unquote retired, meaning that they did serve the Empire. But at the end of the Clone Wars finale, he essentially could have faked his death.
Yeah,
And
he could have.
Part of the
He
Ahsoka
chose not
novel
to.
was that he did fake his death.
Yeah,
So
that's where Rebels throws a real curveball. You know.
yeah, so it's like there's two different storylines there. So I don't know right now
It might
if he's
be-
serving the Empire or not.
I think it could be the kind of thing where he fakes his death, but then years later he gets found by the Empire and maybe questioned as to like, dude, where were you? And then he'll make up some story or whatever. And then he'll be like, all right, well, we got some ragtag clones that have no use to us anyways. We're not just going to kill you off. Let's just throw you on a dustball planet. You can be our scouts there and, you know, check in once every month. And if you see any updates, pass them along.
Yeah.
Other than that, have a happy retirement kind of thing, right? Like, I think that might be the situation. And that'll be a good way to actually connect those two storylines.
There's something like that,
Right now, there's a bit of a disconnect. Yeah.
Which is interesting. I'm curious what they're going to do, because one thing that Dave has always done is he's found plot holes and turned them into really good stories. So
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Dave's really good at that. You know, being an executive producer, he's still got more sway in this show than Mr. Brad. So, you know, Dave can work miracles.
yeah, this would be the series to do it in. And just the fact that Rex was name dropped, I feel like is probably foreshadowing that we're going to run into Rex at some point.
Oh yeah, well, he was in the trailer too. We're definitely gonna have him in the show.
Nice.
Spoilers for anyone who didn't see the trailer. Sorry about that. But yeah, I mean, like, you know, I feel like most people listening probably watched the trailer. But it's probably either the next or the episode after. We'll probably get him in the trailer. And another thing from the trailer that stuck out to me was Fennec Shan from The Mandalorian is going to be in the show as well. A much younger Fennec Shan. 25 something more odd episode, or well, 30 years ish younger Fennec, who's the sniper girl who's helping Boba in season 2 of The Mandalorian. Yeah. So we'll see a much younger version of her pop up, which is kind of cool. You know, it's basically Mulan from Star Wars. So.
Do you know the story of Mulan?
Well, no. The reason why I say it's basically Mulan from Star Wars is the same voice actress. Okay.
As you just saying, and the story of Mulan is she pretends to be a guy. I don't think that's gonna happen.
No, I don't think that's gonna happen. But no, she's the same voice actress, and she wears this color scheme that's kind of similar. It's like the red and the black going on, very similar to the.
It's pretty assassiny, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just her character just kind of reminds me of Mulan. Maybe just because she sounds exactly like her, but.
Because the same actress makes sense. Yeah. So something that I really didn't think about, but actually makes a lot of sense. And though in the episode it was Omega, it's probably true for all the clones, is they don't really know what life is like outside Kamino in this very medical-like facility where everything is just extremely clean and
totally
industrial.
Yeah, that stuck out to me too. You know, Omega gets off the ship for the first time. She feels dirt.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, yeah, I guess that
there's no dirt on Kamino.
Yeah. And it's like the only experience that I've ever had with seeing somebody react a certain way to certain weather that they may have seen before on a picture or video, but never actually touched and felt it, was when my family takes in these students from other parts of the world to go to university here, and we have a very close member of our family now who's from Nigeria, and when she first arrived to us, she was just a student of ours, but she's become part of the family at this point. But the first time that she ever experienced snow was very interesting because they don't get snow in Nigeria. So her reaction though was it was almost very foreign to me, because it's just something that I'd grown up with, and an excitement that I hadn't felt for a very, very long time. And this was somebody who'd never even touched snow before or anything like that, or felt the cool weather. And it was interesting to see that. And it kind of reminded me of that when I watched Omega like bend down and pick up dirt and be so fascinated with this stuff,
foreign substance.
Yeah. And the other guys are like, that's dirt.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, what are you doing?
No, that's actually like a really good example of comparison, because it really is exactly that. It is like someone who's never seen snow before, seeing it for the first time and being confused and like really interested. Yeah,
totally. It's such a foreign thing, and then it's a first time experience for something that's happened. It's something natural. Like it's a weather that you've seen and heard about, and people talk about it, but you've never actually felt it before until you're there, and it's like, wow, what is this?
But seeing Omega go through that, it made me think like that probably happened to all the clones at one point. So I was just thinking, these clones who came off this like stringent medical facility and just thrown into like Geonosis, like this desert, and they're like all at war and just this sandy, awful climate. Yeah. And just not only having to deal with combat for the first time, but also just having no idea, like pretty much everything around them, right? Like this environment. And
it gives you a new outlook on some of those battle scenes from Attack of the Clones, for sure. Because it's definitely something that's always slipped my mind up until now, pretty much, where it's like, oh yeah, like they would have never, none of those clones would have ever felt sand before, or been on a planet that was that rock, warm before.
Anything.
Yeah.
And they're just thrown into that and like, go kill robots.
I mean, they were hype, like, I mean, they were basically born yesterday. Like,
it's true.
They're a couple of years old. I mean, they're
well, they're supposed to be like 9.
What did they say?
I think it's 9.
9 years old or so. Yeah.
Something like that.
The first batch. So because they can grow human males in half the time.
Yeah. So I think they're supposed to be 18. So 9.
Yeah. So, I mean, definitely something that stuck out to me.
Yeah, it's got to be crazy. I think it was briefly mentioned in Battlefront 2 from 2006 or 7, but
the Tamora Morrison voiced campaign. Oh, so good. Classic. I really enjoyed seeing the hologram of this new emerging Imperial officer that we have, which is now working very closely with Tarkin on the military project. And I forget his name now. What's his name? Rampant or
Ramstein?
Ramstein or something? Yeah. You guys know what I'm talking about. So he's an interesting character because he invented the chain code, which is something that's very, very prominent later on in the films and the series, is that's your ID card basically to get anywhere, and your passport to navigate the Empire, to get on and off world.
It's kind of a tracking thing, right? So they know where you're going,
checkpoints, and what
you're doing, kind of like if you're approved or not approved.
Yeah, totally. It's like, or if the stormtroopers just stop, like they could, when they stopped Luke Speeder and Mos Eisley, they could have asked for his chain code right there and then, right? They didn't, but they could have, and that's kind of what it's all for. Is like, that's their driver's license, but across the whole universe. And
I think it's even one more than that. It's not even supposed to be your driver's license. I think it's something that's supposed to be tied to like your DNA, essentially.
It's like your lineage is in there, and pretty much anything about you is like in your chain code, which is pretty nuts. And honestly, I'm starting to put the pieces together now. I think this might be possibly a way as to how those bounty hunter tracker things work from the Mandalorian, because we've always wondered about that. Yeah. We've always wondered, like, how do these things actually track a person?
I think they even say the term chain code in that episode, the first Mandalorian episode.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to rewatch that again now. I only just rewatched the show not long ago, like a week ago. I kid you not, and I'm gonna have to go back to that.
Here we go again.
Here we go again. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure they say
I'm
that.
starting to,
but
I don't know if it is related though. That would make a lot of sense because
doesn't
it instantly know.
Like how do you track DNA?
I don't know.
Like
That's the thing.
magnetism.
I've always puzzled about that too. And by the time of the Mandalorian, the Empire's gone, so people aren't checking in and out of different places anyway. You know?
It's true.
So I don't know. Maybe that theory doesn't hold up very well, but I don't know. It's just questions. The questions I have. Dave, answer them all.
Really, whenever we do a podcast, Dave should have to put out a podcast like 2 days later answering all of our questions. I think that's how this should work.
You know what? Dave has come on the show a few times in the past, but we haven't heard him for a while. I feel like we should.
Hey, we give him a call.
We should get him on here.
Hey, give him a call.
Give him a call. Give him a call. 1 second. Let me call him. You know what? No, I see him at the door.
Oh, what timing?
Hey, Dave, what's going on? Come on in. Okay. Just grab the microphone here. Hey, Blake, how's it going?
Hi, Dave. It's good to see you. It's been a long time. Yeah.
It's good to see you too. Yeah.
Yeah, I had some questions for you.
Yeah, I was looking at you guys through the window and saw that you might have some questions. I just confused faces. So
how long were you out there?
Come in. Oh, a couple of days.
Days?
I arrived yesterday.
Man, you're really excited for the podcast.
Yeah. Oh, man. I go every week just wanting to come back on the show. And
yeah, you're a big fan of Star Wars Escape Pod. I know that.
It's been a while, man. It's been a while.
Yeah.
Hit me up. What's your question?
Dave, what is the deal with these chain codes and how do you track them? How do you track people across the galaxy with this DNA strand or number sequence?
Well, it's funny. I took a note out of George's book for this one, and I thought I would just wait 30 years to give the answer. People love waiting for new Star Wars content, and I feel like that was the right call. I'll get Brad to do it later on.
Well, I look forward to that day. Maybe you can give us a little hint of what's going on.
Yeah, come on, Dave. No. All right, see ya. Dave, come on.
Man, you kind of leaves pretty quick.
Man, he's just out of there. Just leaves so quick.
Did you notice him outside your window for 3 days?
I did not.
He was just on your patio?
Just on my patio. Sitting there.
How did he get up there?
Man, he's from Pittsburgh, right? So he's
good wall climbers. There's a lot of good wall climbers from Pittsburgh. They're good at scaling.
Yeah. He's got like a bunch of penguins on the ends of ropes that just fly
they help him. They hold him up.
It's like Mary Poppins. He just comes and goes when he wants.
I'm picturing Madagascar.
Travel by penguin. Yeah.
He's like genius penguins that figure everything out.
Modern day Mary Poppins. Dave Filoni, everybody. Dave Filoni.
Yeah, the other thing similar to chain codes, though, is they're also basically telling everyone that Republic credits are worth nothing, and you have to transition to the Imperial credits.
Yeah, and it's so cool to see this like transition period because like this is something that's just I like to see this stuff on screen and not necessarily always just be reading books and stuff to get this. Yeah, just assuming things through sentences and books and whatever. But it's so great to have like a staple show that's telling the story, really good. Because
I'm sure that's something we've all noticed is if you watch the prequels, you get lines like Republic credits are no good out here. And then you get to the original trilogy and they pay you with Imperial credits. It's like at some point, do they just rename it? That's what I had always assumed. But it seems that there's actually an actual different currency that they're making you transition into.
Well, it's a difference in value because, of course, half the galaxy is probably using some sort of separatist currency, which I I know nothing about. But that's transition. And like anything, I mean, like think about our own real world about when a company gets bought out, and that affects people's stocks, right, in the company, and that'll naturally play into a large part of when they have two currencies, two sides of the galaxy in different, economic systems, and the Empire comes in and blows that all away, and they make up their own currency called the Imperial credit.
Yeah,
it's like it's not. It must not be a 1-for-1.
That's what I was wondering too, because if it's a brand
value.
new currency, and the trouble with currency as well, I don't know if it's different in Star Wars, but here in the real world, is it has to be backed by something because that's what gives it its value, right? So in the West, our dollar's all backed by oil. It's a petroleum dollar, a petrodollar, right? So it used to be gold back in the day, and they've switched off of that. So if they're transitioning to this new currency, is it just like a total fiat currency?
Yeah,
they just make it up. Yeah. They just make up what it's worth on the spot.
Yeah, I don't know, honestly, and I think that's where this show kind of plays a little into that. Is like we might not get the full economics of how that system works, but we might get some sort of simple explanation as to it's like, all right, bring your Republic credits to this station. We change them over for you and give you whatever it's worth in Imperial credits, right?
Yeah,
and the Empire is not the kind of government either.
That's a lot of work, though. Just think of every stall, every corner store across the entire galaxy having to probably not just relabel everything to Imperial credits, but having to actually change the value to whatever this new currency is supposed to be.
Yeah,
that's a lot of work.
And I think that's why so many of these outlaws are, like Rex, for example, he's on this dust ball in the middle of nowhere where there's like nobody. And I can see why places like Mos Eisley become this wretched hive of scum and villainy, because like there's nowhere you can't go that isn't the Empire, right? And people are trying to escape that. At least people who are outlaws and, criminals of all sorts, they all end up in the same places. Yeah. And then you get these environments like Nar Shaddaa, for example, always known to be a very, very much a bustling city, but filled with criminals. And Imperial activity there must be pretty lackluster, to say the least, because I think Nar Shaddaa is in hot space. And if I'm not mistaken, hot space has always been, even in the Empire era, has always been a bit of a lackluster area for the Stormtrooper Corps as far as support, to represent. So you find a lot of those people heading to places like that. Yeah.
It's a lot less patrolled, right? And I bet. Yeah. Do we know if Jabba operates under Imperial credits? Because there are still other third-party credit systems or like currencies, right?
I actually don't know.
Yeah, because I feel like in all the games and stuff, it's always just credits. It's all you ever deal with is just credits.
It's just credits, yeah.
But we see in Mandalorian that there are different currencies you can get, right? Because instead of getting paid in Imperial credits, which Mando calls a dead currency, that timeline, instead he gets paid in
the Mon Cala phlegm or something.
Yeah,
or Mon Cala
phlegm.
Yeah.
Well, the Mon Cala currency.
Something or another, yeah. But I think and I think that comes down to Mon Cala honestly has always been an interesting kind of outlying place where they've always defied the Empire, right? Like in a way, because it's important to remember that the Mon Cala have always been very closely involved with the rebellion. And in the comic books, more recently with the Darth Vader comic books, they have a really bad relationship with the Empire, right? Like Vader comes in there and he's killing everybody, and there's something about that planet. I don't think they ever came under full control of the Empire at any point. Like they've always been a little tougher to for the Empire to really maintain control. So for them to retain their currency from the old days is a very likely scenario that they were able to do that, hold on to that long enough that it surpassed the era of the Empire has grown into this era of the New Republic, which I'm sure in this New Republic era, they're probably in the same situation. It's like, do we actually transition back to the Republic credit, or do we let planets kind of do their own thing with currency and people just kind of trade and figure out what's worth what, like as they please kind of thing? And, you know, it's like, it's kind of like our own planet.
Question.
Like if you go to Europe, yeah, it's like if you go to Europe, you get your dollars converted over to euros or pounds or whatever you're doing. But I mean, there's a system there to get it converted. So maybe that's how they do it in the New Republic era. Whereas right now it's like, boom, everything's on the same coin.
Yeah. And you probably got to go through the black market to switch to the Imperial system if you're not on it, right? And vice versa, if you want to get away from it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, exactly.
Because I think Imperial credits are also a marked currency, so they can be tracked as well, kind of like a credit card.
Oh, really?
I believe so, yeah. Like I think that's kind of the basis for all the Imperial stuff. Like same with the chain code. They want your ships to be coded, everything. I want
everything's tracked.
Total tracking.
I wouldn't be surprised, honestly. That's the Empire.
It's like if Amazon controlled the government. Like that's basically what it'd be like, or like Facebook or something.
Yeah. Do you have anything left on your list there? Or should we start talking about
so
Omega?
I had
All right.
briefly brought up last week or last time we talked about the show, some of the Commando book stuff, and something that again really ties into what was going on there is in this episode, we're going to a farming planet where these deserters are kind of hiding out and they're bringing this kid. And it seemed like the plan was to actually have the kid stay there with Cut and his family. And that's exactly what happened in the Commando books, except instead of them leaving right away like they did in this episode, they stayed there for like a few months or a year.
Yeah. So
I don't know. I just find it really neat, and they're just kind of following loosely the Commando novels in this.
Yeah,
I'm really enjoying that a lot. I thought it was
it's interesting.
Up.
Yeah, now that you pointed out, I'm just trying to think it over. Like you pointed out, and like there are weirdly these similarities that definitely stick out.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's supposed to be intentional or if it's just a coincidence or the fact that
if it was one, I'd say it's a coincidence, but there's been several.
Yeah, it's a question for Brad then. I wonder if supervising director Brad would know a little more about
And we do know that Dave is a fan of the EU, right? And he's trying to bring a lot of it back when he can. So maybe this is him doing a bit of an homage to it.
Yeah, it's just like he wants the same story beats.
Yeah.
Or something like that. Yeah, definitely possible.
Because it's pretty similar.
Yeah, for sure.
And something you wanted to get into later has to do with that too, I think.
Yeah, we'll get into that. Whenever you're ready, just bring it up.
All right.
We'll start diving in.
I got a few more. Something that actually kind of dawned on me when I was watching it is the voice actor who does the clones.
D. Bradley Baker.
Yeah. He does like 90% of the show.
Yeah.
There's like 3 other people.
I think they cut down a lot on the budget for this show just because he's like the main guy.
He just does everything. And it's funny. One thing I actually noticed that kind of bothers me is once in a while when they have 2 of the clones that have the same voice, they'll change one slightly. And I've noticed it's always Echo whose voice changes because Echo and Hunter have the same voice. Well, the others all have a slight accent. Mm-hmm. So if Hunter and Echo were talking to each other, Echo's kind of voice, the way he sounds, changes slightly, and it's really weird.
Like it goes more nasally.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good way to describe it. And I don't know if that's just so you can tell the difference, like that there's 2 people talking. But
I think so. Because Echo didn't always sound like that.
He sounds different.
Yeah.
And sometimes he sounds normal, and then other times he doesn't.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. You compare him to the earlier seasons of the Clone Wars, and he definitely sounds a little different. Yeah.
Yes, it's interesting. Yeah. But I thought that was pretty funny. Well, just sitting there, I wonder when he's in the recording room if he's just saying all the lines at once if he records all of one character and then the other, or like how that works. Could you imagine talking to yourself
I'd like to know.
the whole
Honestly,
way?
He must record the lines once for
Each character.
I don't know. He must. This is my guess, is that he records the lines once for each character, but then they edit them and play them back to him, and then he can talk.
So he can respond to himself.
Yeah.
What a
that
weird
must
situation.
be how he does it. Yeah, because I know that when they did Clone Wars, that's how they did it. They had everyone in the room together when they did recordings, and that way they could feed off each other's energy really well, right? So
if there's one guy
doing it, if it's one guy, they must have a system of playing back what he's just said, and then he's able to respond to that in a way that would make sense, right? That's my guess. I don't know. I don't know if that's actually the case, but
I would think so, just for timing purposes, but they can also edit that. So I don't know.
Yeah, they can.
And some of the voice differences I've noticed are filters, not him doing an accent.
Right.
So I don't know if some of it's just done in post. It's a good question, though.
It'll be interesting to see if his job starts to get a little more condensed. Because here's the thing about these Darth Vader comics that I've read, which really... the Dark Lord of the Sith comics, right? That really play into this same block of time, is that amongst those 4 volumes, there is no indication that they're transitioning away from stormtroopers. Like the story is completely focused on Darth Vader and the Emperor, and there are clones in it, but they never talk about the stormtrooper term or anything like that.
Yeah.
And I don't know how long that series takes place over a group of, batch of time. I would assume that it takes place over a year. So it's possible that this entire first season, we won't have any indication to transitioning to stormtroopers in, the first season at all. Like I would say maybe the second season might get into that, but it depends on how quickly they want to pass. Yeah. It depends on how quickly they want to pass the time. Right. But as that happens, I would imagine that D. Bradley Baker will have less voices to do, because right now he's doing the clones as well. Like the normal clones. Right. So he's got a busy guy. He's a busy guy. Yeah.
Man, interesting. I mean, he kind of had done this for a long time throughout Clone Wars, so it's probably not that weird to him. But now that he's playing like four or five members.
Yeah, Matt Lanter's not around.
5 of 6 of the main characters.
Yeah. He's not talking to Ashley anymore. He's not talking to Matt. He's not talking to James.
Yeah.
All Tom, like all the other guys who were doing voices on Clone Wars, like he doesn't have them anymore.
He does an Omega as well. He just does an accent. They put a filter on it.
He does Omega as well.
No, he doesn't.
No, I thought that. Okay, all right. I was like,
funny,
what?
There's no characters left. There's just like the Twi'lek character and like some random characters that show up. Other than that, it's just all him.
Yeah. They go to meet Cut LaQuaid. He does him too.
That's right. Yeah, I know, right?
It's like featuring special guest character Cut LaQuaid, also voiced by D. Bradley Baker. Just featuring special guest Captain Rex, also voiced by D. Bradley Baker.
They can only afford one guy.
Yeah.
I hope
Clone Wars on a budget.
I hope he gets paid for each character.
It's Clone Wars on a budget. Oh man, can you imagine?
Like 10 paychecks.
10. It makes you wonder. It's like, is he getting paid per word, per episode?
It's a good question.
Season?
It kind of goes back to that Simpsons joke from back in the day where they meet the woman who does the voice of Roadrunner, and she goes, "Yeah, I used to do the voice of Roadrunner. They recorded me for it." Meep. I'm like, do you mean meep meep? It's like, nah, they only paid me to record it once, and they doubled it on the track. Cheap beggars.
Meep.
Meep.
So cheap.
It's like, we could just double it up. Why would we pay you twice?
Yeah.
So I actually thought it was really cool that we got to see a ship for like impounding other ships, because that's never been done before.
Oh yeah, we always just see the things on them afterwards.
Yeah, when they're in the yard. We never got to see how they got there. So there's actually a ship like I guess like a tractor beam or kind of like a magnetized thing that just like grabs the other ships and like moves them away. I thought that was super cool. I kind of never questioned it before, but it was neat to see how it's done.
It's neat. It's neat world building for sure. Because again, another little gap, just like, oh, that's how they do it. Like, that's nice to know.
It was neat. And that makes me wonder then if we do another role-playing game, to have a ship like that, and we can steal everyone else's ships and sell on the black market.
Yeah, totally.
Every GM loves that.
Yeah. Breaks the game.
Just become ultra wealthy. So, was it just me, or did the clones actually start to feel like they're actually stormtroopers here?
Yeah. Oh no, it's for sure. I felt that way too. You know, like you take one look at the Imperial checkpoints, and it's very obvious that they're meant to be antagonized now. And you know, the Bad Batch has no problem, you know, ripping holes in these clones, like when they need to break out their ship, right? Like they have no problem shooting up these regs. And the clones obviously don't really fully know who they are, because there's no sense of recognition when they start shooting at them, because they're all dressed up in costumes and you know, maybe just too far away to notice. But yeah, it's like it's interesting though, because they are being antagonized at this point in the story, and we're going to see a lot more of that as we go by. And the real transition will come when they sort out this entire secondary plot line, which is like, how are these stormtroopers going to play into the mix? And
I think if they add Rex to the story, that's going to add a lot of extra depth to it, because really they're shooting their own brothers right now, right? But I think the thing that makes it kind of a disconnect is the Bad Batch has never felt like they were actually part of the rest of the regs.
Right.
So they don't have that same brotherhood that a regular trooper would have.
They were already outsiders before they became even more of an outsider.
Yeah, exactly. Right? But if Rex ends up join them, and he has to shoot his brothers, like I think that would cause a lot of trauma to him.
Yeah. In a way, I think like the Bad Batch is honestly such a great group of characters to fill this story with, because they were outsiders before the turn of events, and yet they're still clones, but they're outsiders, right? And now they're also, at least most of them that is, were unaffected by their inhibitor chips. Yeah. So it's it makes them such a great cast of characters to have in a show that takes place after the events of the Clone Wars, but still uses clones as a main character, right?
No, it's a good point, because like they're clones, but they're not at the same time.
Yeah, totally.
It's interesting,
Mm-hmm. It also makes them the only other exception, other than Rex and, you know, potentially Wolf and Gregor, if they got their chips sorted out. You know,
we knew they do in the end, but I don't know how far in that takes place.
I don't know how far in that is, and maybe that might be something in this first season that we'll see. It's like maybe Rex will help them with something, and then they've got to help Rex take back some of these friends of his that have survived the war, and they want to save them from the chips, right?
Yeah, they like and break in somewhere.
Yeah, and it wouldn't surprise me now that they're starting to tamper with dialing up the effectiveness of these things,
chips,
right? Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me is if they start doing that to every single clone and reconditioning them to be more loyal, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that would make sense to me, because right now Tarkin's worry is that over the events of the war, they've become a little too creative and too out of regulation.
Yeah, self-thinking, right?
Yeah, self-thinking. Yeah, they've become and it's because of this was actually brought up in the Clone Wars as well. It's like that's actually a result of the Jedi playing a huge impact in the way that these clones think, right?
Because like the clones themselves were, for everyone else in the galaxy, maybe this is pulling too much from like also the commando books and stuff, but they were always like taught or like responded to from other people of the galaxy no different than droids. They were like toasters or a commodity.
Right.
They weren't actually real people. And the Jedi were the only ones who treated them like real people.
Yeah, it's true. They gave them respect and treated them like people and humans, and that was a big part of the Clone Wars that I really liked how they worked that into the story. And so yeah, it's going to be interesting going forward for sure.
Yeah, especially at this point. And then they all start retiring and stuff. They got to join regular society.
Yeah,
that's going to be crazy.
But yeah, it definitely, these inhibitor chips, to me, I'm like, oh, well, if they start dialing up the effectiveness of this, maybe there's the effectiveness of these chips, maybe there's some side effects to the effectiveness as to whether or not they'll work in the end. As to the effectiveness as to like whether they'll work in the end, right? With these inhibitor chips, and just if they'll cause problems by doing so, right? So maybe Rex is like, oh, we gotta break my friends out, like the people that I actually care about, or something like that, or there's got to be some way that maybe these characters will get sucked back into the story. Yeah,
it'll be something like that. That makes me wonder if there's going to be a side effect. To like how they affect the chips. Quicker. Yeah, I wonder if something's going to happen.
Yeah, maybe they're mentally going to start breaking down if they start dialing up the effectiveness of this thing, right?
Could be that. They start to go crazy. Maybe they'll turn on the Empire somehow because they were originally designed to be part of the Republic. I don't know.
Right. Who knows? Yeah.
It's good. Yeah. See where it goes. And so was one thing I wanted to point out, which I thought was really fun, was the story of Omega through this, where I guess the Bad Batch crew, they're not used to having a kid around. And they want her to be safe, so they decide the best thing to do is to send her off with Cut and his kids, which does seem like the best thing on paper. And I realized that I had seen this story before. They had taken this from Air Bud. With the dog basketball movie, where the kid he finds this dog and he realizes that he's got to set the dog free if the dog will be have a happier life. So he tries to set the dog free. The dog leaves, and then eventually it comes back to the owner, just like Omega did.
It's been so long since I've seen that movie, man.
It's a 90s classic.
Yeah. They shot them all locally, too.
Oh, that was in Langley, wasn't it?
It was, yeah, it was.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, so with Omega, now that you've brought Omega up, let's kind of get into this because first off, I mean, like, she is a clone and she feels like she belongs with her brothers, basically. And, she makes her own choice in that regard. And I think they all kind of respect that when she shows up in that last scene. Mm-hmm. And they take off and they're like, all right, you're one of us, right? This is where you want to be. This is where you're going to stay. But what I really like to think about Omega is like her genetic alteration, I don't think is just female, right? Like I don't think that is the only thing that's different about her, right?
Well,
I think
we've also seen that she learns things very quickly.
Yeah, all the hints, honestly, to me, all these hints are kind of making me think that she is the first successful Force-sensitive clone. That's what I'm thinking.
The question is why? Because we know she was a specialty bred to help be an assistant in the cloning process.
Well, there's one Clone Wars arc, maybe two actually, that stick out to me. The first one, I believe, came from season 2 of Star Wars: The Clone Wars. And there's an arc where Anakin and Ahsoka go off and try and search for all these children of the Force because Palpatine's evil plan is to kidnap them and turn them into agents of evil, right?
Yeah.
And Cad Bane is the one going around the galaxy hunting all these kids. And, so there's that. Second thing is Pong Krell, the Umbaran arc. He has a vision that he becomes an agent of Dooku's, right? Or of the Sith, I guess. Not a Sith himself, but an agent of the Sith. Furthermore, we have evidence later on that with the Inquisitorius, which was invented in these the Darth Lord of the Sith comic books, like these Darth Vader comic books, play a huge part in hunting down the Jedi afterwards. Jedi Fallen Order, Star Wars Rebels, they pop up here and there. And those would be the agents that maybe Pong Krell was looking at.
Yeah,
when he,
referring to. It sounds
right?
like it.
Yeah, and obviously, Rex made sure that. Well, actually, not Rex. It was Dogma. What's his name? The clone that he was trying to. Dogma.
Yeah, the guy, the straight arrow who wouldn't bend the rules.
That's right. Yeah. He shot him, and and so Von Krell ended up not becoming an agent of evil after all. However, Palpatine is the kind of guy that has backup plan after backup plan after backup plan, and as so it seems, and seems like the kind of guy, especially knowing how the sequels end up. Seems like the kind of guy that he would want to experiment with cloning of the Force sensitive, right?
The thing is, the Kaminoans seemed like they wanted to keep it a secret.
Yeah, it's true, which leads me to believe that perhaps they had their suspicions toward the end of the Clone Wars and kept it a secret that they succeeded.
Yeah. Or they just
Possibly.
did it themselves as a test to see if they could, because there was a Jedi there.
Yes. Also possible, yeah. They were thinking, hey, we can get a little bit of extra coin in the cookie jar if we come up with this new experiment. It's like, oh, you don't even need to recruit the Jedi to be your generals anymore. We can breed our own.
Yeah.
We can breed our own Jedi generals. They just they don't even need to be trained by the Jedi. They just learn things really quickly and do things themselves, right? That might have been the next step, the next evolution of cloning is like we can make people with powers, right? Not just people who are extra strong or extra wise or whatever, but we can actually make people with the ability to use this crazy Force magic stuff that we know nothing about yet, but we're gonna learn it, right? Because Kaminoans are all about the science and all about.
I think they're non-Force
pushing
sensitive
the edge
from all their cloning. I think that's the canon.
Yeah. So far, cloning, at least from the Kaminoans, have always been unsuccessful at producing
Force sensitive clones.
With Force sensitive
the Kaminoans
clones, right?
themselves are clones, so.
Yeah. However, I think that fact, I don't know if that's actually in the canon or not, but I mean,
I hope so. It's supposed to be the whole point.
It would make sense.
Like
it's EU stuff. I have not seen it in the canon yet, but right. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if
the canon hasn't
an intention
touched the prequels much outside the shows. So
no, yeah, literally anything to do with Kamino is in the Clone Wars or in Attack of the Clones. That's it. Like there's hardly any substance between episode 1 and 2, which is where a lot of that fact would probably play into it, right?
Yeah,
and then of course they're already being shoved out the door in this show, which is immediately after episode 3. So there's really not a big window of insight into this species. But I like that idea, and it would be cool if they actually acknowledge that in the show, because I think that does lead to some interesting venues. But yeah, as far as Omega goes, I mean, I've got my theories as to say that she is a Force sensitive clone, and perhaps even if she isn't fully Force sensitive in a way that she can be a Jedi, but maybe she's just Force sensitive enough that she can utilize elements of the Force, right?
Right, unlike in the other clones.
Yeah.
Well, that would make it extra interesting in the fact that would make it even more like the Commando books, because the kid they're looking after is a Force sensitive half Jedi, half clone.
It always comes back to the Commando books.
Dude, there's so much going on here. I'm just saying, if your theory holds true, then it literally is the kid who's in the Commando books.
Right. Yeah. Honestly, I think it's a huge possibility. I think we're going that route, because that's the one thing that stays true in every element of Star Wars, aside from Solo, but we get that appearance of Darth Maul at the very end, so maybe Solo also has it. But Rogue One is the only movie that really made its way through the entire length of the film without showing off a Force user. right? Well, actually, no. That's not true. There's Darth Vader at the very end as well, but it didn't focus in on it. It didn't focus in on a Force user, right?
Yeah.
Every other element of Star Wars, though, kind of plays into some sort of person who has the ability to use the Force. Aside from Solo and Rogue One, there were Force users in it. Small appearances, though, right?
Yeah, like Darth Maul or whatever.
Something that stuck out to me, though, with the behind the scenes of the Rogue One was the idea behind Chirrut Inway, which is Donnie Yen's character. He is part of the main cast of characters because they wanted the element of the Force, but not necessarily a Force user, but just somebody who could feel attuned to the Force, right? Had this ability to sense it, but not use it, right?
Yeah.
And again, life would not exist without the midichlorians. In the Star Wars universe, that's a fact, right? And so everybody's got the potential to feel the Force, but not everyone has the ability to pick up a speeder bike and huck it at somebody with it, right? So there's this limit as to say, like, okay, these people have these gifts, but not everyone has the ability to do that. But everyone does have the ability to feel the Force, and that was something that I think the prequels sort of made a gray area with this very black and white. Okay, some people can do it, some people can't, right? I think Rogue One was a great insight into saying that everyone in the Star Wars universe had this ability to be part of this it's almost thing if they wanted to, right?
They were trying to bridge the gap between the original trilogy where anyone could be a Force user and the prequels where you need to have a certain like blood number count,
like a certain level, a certain level of chlorians, right? Yeah, midichlorians.
And they've kind of fiddled with that a bit to anyone can still use it, but your natural ability to learn it
is like way reduced.
Yeah, is directly tied to midichlorians. Yeah, so the more midichlorians you have, the faster you can learn stuff. Right. The more quickly it'll respond to you.
Yeah, exactly. So and so my theory is that Omega has this mutation for learning things not only quickly, but she also has a second mutation for feeling the Force. Maybe not using it, but feeling it, because those hints are there.
I can see it.
We'll see what happens, but that's my theory.
Maybe what'll happen is Palpatine will find out about Omega and her Force sensitivity, and that will give him the idea to make Force sensitive clones, and that'll lead to Snoke. But the Kaminoans will raise their rebellion, and their knowledge will be lost. So he's got to refigure it out.
Here's the other thing about Force sensitive cloning. Okay, now that you brought it up, I caught up recently on the Darth Vader comic books, the new ones, the ones that take place between episodes 5 and 6. Okay. Because I've loved the Darth Vader comic books. Like I've read the first 4 volumes of the entire series of the Dark Lord of the Sith ones that take place after episode 3. I've read them maybe 2 or 3 times, the whole series, all the way through, because it's my favorite series ever. I've read all of the ones between episode 4 and 5. I've read that series once. Very good series, like up there with the other series I mentioned. And now I've been reading this new series, this third one that takes place between episode 5 and 6, and pretty much starts immediately after that movie finishes. Like after episode 5 ends, it's like, what does Darth Vader do when he watches the Millennium Falcon shoot off into hyperspace and loses Luke Skywalker, his son, right? That he's just revealed the truth to. And it follows that storyline immediately after and keeps going. And he goes on a quest for finding answers as to who's been sheltering the boy his whole life, who's been involved in the covering up of this whole thing. And he's ready to kill anyone who is responsible for that.
Isn't that when he sent Boba Fett to check out Obi-Wan's hut?
No, that was the last story. That was when he was trying to find his son in the first place.
Okay.
So this is like after he's revealed the truth. Now he's on a quest to be like, my son is weak. He turned down the dark side of the Force. I'm going to kill whoever played a part in his life, basically. So he goes off to find whoever was, right? And he ends up at the homestead of the Lars family, which is like the first thing that he goes to that I guess he has an accompanied forensics droid that helps him on this mission, and death troopers. He's got a squad of death troopers with him for the whole duration of this thing. he goes to the Lars homestead. He goes to Naboo. He comes face to face with some of the Queen's shadow, Sabe, who Keira Knightley played in The Phantom Menace, like the Queen's double, who looks like Padme. He mistakes her for Padme. It's so interesting. It's like amazing, right? And it was such a good storyline. And it gives you a sense as to what all those characters from The Phantom Menace have been doing this whole time, like Padme's
body double,
like Captain Typho and Panaka or whatever, like all those guys. Like it's like, what have they been doing this whole time? They're calling themselves Amidalans in memory of her life, kind of thing. They made their own culture based on the
sounds like a cult.
Yeah, well, they basically made a pact with each other, saying like, we're going to do everything we can to get justice for her death, because they have a theory as to how she died and everything like that. I don't want to spoil the whole thing. But after this whole arc is over, Vader gets sucked into this second story where he basically ends up at Exegol, and like he goes on this journey to find the Emperor's new batch of secrets that he's been keeping from Vader and stuff like that. And when he gets to Exegol, he finds all these Bacta tank things, the big vats that Snoke is kept in. And he finds all these like early versions of Snokes. And in a jar, not too far away from these vats, is Luke Skywalker's hand. And so they are using
that story. Interesting.
So they basically pointed in the canon now towards the fact that Snoke is actually based on the genetic structure of Luke Skywalker.
Yeah.
Which means that Snoke is part Skywalker.
Yes.
He's a weird, honestly, if Vader and Palpatine had a baby, that's what Snoke is. Literally. Like, in a way, in a
that's
weird,
really
twisted
creepy
way.
To think about.
It's super, super creepy and messed up. But you know what? I'm kind of digging it. I'm like,
that's funny,
this
though.
Actually makes sense.
Do you remember all the rumors when Episode 7 was coming out?
Yeah.
One of the big rumors was the movie would open to Luke's hand with a lightsaber like floating in space.
That's right. Yeah, that was a rumor, and in fact, I think it's a legit thing. I think one of the earlier copies of the script actually did have that, and so this is a possible play up on that itself is like an acknowledgement to that storyline, right? And maybe this hand was scooped up by the Empire, and who knows, right? But the fact is, like, Luke's hand is preserved in a thing. Palpatine's already, like, almost right after Episode 5, a couple months have gone by, barely, and they're already using Luke's hand to come up with these Snoke things, right?
And also, I want to point out that in the Thrawn trilogy, Luke has to duel a clone of himself that was cloned from his hand.
Yeah. So another element of the EU making its way back into canon, yeah. And here's the thing about that, like, not everything from the EU is gold. I mean, I've never been fond of the Dark Empire series. I've never been a huge fan of Palpatine returning.
I actually didn't mind the Palpatine returning clone story. I actually thought it was kind of neat, especially because Palpatine, to me, has a million plans.
He does.
But I do feel that comic series actually did a better job than what we got.
It did. It did a lot better. Yeah.
To me, I don't think Palpatine's plan to come back would take 20 years.
30 years.
Yeah.
30. You're right. Yeah. I think that's the biggest problem I have with it too. And also just amongst the films, it wasn't the plan, right? Like the trilogy was never planning on doing that up until like Last Jedi ending, and they're like, okay, let's turn things around here.
And that's why that comic made sense, because because the weird force effect that you get when Palps dies is the only person ever where that happens, when he gets thrown down the shaft. So that actually made sense for him to go his like a Sith magic, his soul going to a clone.
I always just thought it was the energy from the bottom of the reactor shaft that was just sparking stuff up. I didn't ever think that it was his soul like coming out of that thing, you know?
Some force magic.
Yeah, I never thought it was that. I always thought like it was just a reaction to because there was something glowing at the bottom, right? So I was like, oh, he just blew something up and hit the bottom. But I mean, yeah, that's an interesting theory though. But my entire thing about Luke's hand and everything like that, it's led me to the thought that the Emperor's always had experiments going on with Force users, even in the Darth Vader comics, that the ones that you read, which are after Episode 4. I think you stopped partway through. It got kind of strange when they started implementing these.
It's the Grievous.
It was the Mon Cala Grievous.
Yeah, I always get to that part. I'm like, this is dumb.
Yeah, so he doesn't make it too long.
I've read it up to there twice.
You should push past that. Just get through it. He doesn't last forever.
It started becoming a lot about Dr. Afro or whatever too at that point.
Yeah. So the Emperor's always had these experiments. He's always wanted these agents of evil, right? Some way, some form, whether it be failed Jedi that he's converting into Inquisitors or cloning them or whatever. Like whatever his plan is, he's always wanted Force minions running around that he wants them to do what he wants, right? And the fact that they get Luke's hand and start cloning Snoke's like that leads me to believe that he's tampered with Force cloning before. And I think that's where Omega comes in. I think this was an idea that he's had in his head for a very long time. And perhaps because he's obsessed with immortality, right? Yeah. Obsessed. Like, I mean, assuming that the tale that he tells Anakin about Darth Plagueis is true, maybe he's thinking, if there's no way to create life with the Force, maybe with Sith alchemy and various other means, we can create a duplicate body and then just work on the easier stuff, which might be transferring my soul into another body.
Easier stuff.
Yeah.
Download it into a brain chip.
Just download it. Yeah. Force download. But yeah, I mean, like, I think he's always kind of had this thought, right? And maybe that's where Omega comes into this whole thing. Maybe they'll make sense of it all in the end. Yeah. I have no idea. Yeah.
I think
lots of theories.
I feel like I need to bring it up just because we're talking about clones and whether Force sensitive is Force Unleashed 2. Where you find out you're playing a clone of Starkiller, Galen Merrick, and Darth Vader has all these clones of his previous Sith assassin apprentice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, part of the expanded universe, Legends. It's always been something they've worked in a couple times with the cloning of Force users, you know, and remained more of a possibility in that storyline than it is so far in the canon. But I'm glad you brought that up because it is a very well-known game,
Yeah, even though now the story is kind of overlooked, but I do recall, I don't know about the second one, which is when you get the clones, but the first one was always sold as the first canon Star Wars game because George had input on it. But I never really... That's the thing. Like when that game came out, it was back in the day in which there was just expanded universe stuff. Like it was just the films, and that was it. And there was like some games and books. They just made it up as they went along. It didn't matter.
Exactly. It's like Leland Chi was the only guy keeping any of this stuff somewhat consistent, and that was all we had. Like was some bare few. We didn't have a story group back then, keeping this stuff all tied together and make sense and make it feel more like Star Wars. Like you got a lot of weird stuff back then. Some of it was cool. Some of it was just a little over the top. But,
you could tell they crammed as much into that game as they could. Where he started the rebellion, right? And there's a bunch of stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely.
But it was neat in the second one because I think that was the first time outside of a book that we got to see a clone Force user. And I feel like it was always kind of considered impossible from a fan's perspective. I'm not sure what, maybe that was just some like rumor that made itself around. But I remember talking to people and everyone always had the opinion that it can't be done. And that's why they never did it in the Clone Wars, right?
Yeah. I mean, and the Clone Wars directly is canon, and that was directly from George. So it's possible that he said specifically, he's like, we can't do this. Like, this is not something I want to do with the story. And again, to go back to Dark Empire, like those comics and books and all those early elements of the expanded universe was literally what it is, and how it's referred to as the expanded universe is this expansive story of Star Wars, which isn't necessarily as closely supervised as the maker wants it to be. You know, like this is a space where other creatives can tell stories, but it's not necessarily anything that would keep George from changing stuff as he makes the movies going forward, right?
For sure.
And that's what made it the expanded universe. And you know, today when we have all this canon stuff all kept very closely knit together, and you know, all that, it's all down to the details. And I feel like, you know, this is the era of just successful franchises like that. I mean, look at Marvel. Like, they've come out with 20 something odd movies. They've got Disney Plus shows all the way up to, you know, 20 of them announced, kind of thing. And
that
they're
being
all
said,
going to be,
they're not tied to the novels. They still have comics and everything coming out that is entirely different than their
they're not
movie
tied to the
universe.
novels. Yeah. So they've got a little bit less to kind of, I guess it must be easier going from show to movie to show to movie and so on and so forth. Star Wars, though, they put out less movies, but way less movies, way less shows, at least for the time being. They announced half as many as Marvel did at the Disney Plus, you know, shareholders meeting or whatever.
Yeah. D23.
Yeah. But they do have way more continuity through their novels and books and stuff like that, and audiobook specials, which now we're going to be getting a third one later this year with High Republic with Tempest Runner. But so there is a bit more of a back and forth with the storytellers on the literature side, and then the ones on the TV animated side, and then the directors and the writers on the films, and
right,
you know,
there's
like
a lot more moving
collaboration.
parts.
Yeah,
like
way more
different
moving parts.
media.
Yeah, for sure. So, you know, in a way, it's almost more difficult than Marvel. But, you know, the fact that we have this era of time where successful franchises have that continuity amongst the media, whatever media they're telling the story with, it works out pretty well. You know, like people like that stuff, and you know, I'm a big fan of it. I like it when I see stuff recognized in the.
It still feels to me a bit like old EU, because I don't have the time to read through everything that comes out, that I still like stumble across stuff that came out like 2 years ago. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I didn't know that happened. Which used to happen with the old EU all the time, because it was around for 30 plus years, 40 years. So
yeah. The EU has been around a long time. I mean, you know, first book coming out even before Empire Strikes Back. You know, it's the EU. Star Wars Legends has been going on for a long time. Like, it was like a 30-something-year-old process of other people telling Star Wars stories.
There was a big gap in the 90s, though. Late 80s.
Yeah, there was.
The 90s,
yeah,
but.
There was. Yeah, there was a bit of a space there. Not to say that we didn't have things from Dark Horse or whatever, but there was less there than in other times. But there was so much done that it resulted in over 250 Star Wars novels in the EU. There's over 250.
I just don't understand. Why couldn't they just kept it all canon?
Over 250, spanning the length of thousands of years.
Yeah.
All the way up until Cade Skywalker, which is like hundreds of years after Return of the Jedi, right? So there's a lot of story stuff there. And there was some weird stuff. There was some not so weird stuff. There was some things that I would have loved if they, you know, kept canon. I know there's
Mara
things
Jade.
that Mara Jade. I mean, Thrawn, you know, was brought back. There's rumors that Mara Jade could always be a thing that returns.
I feel like it's become less and less likely as time has gone on. But, you know, I'm still crossing my fingers. They're tired holding this position this long, but still there.
As time goes by, though, we do see these returning elements, and I think Force cloning is just one of those things that, I mean, Episode 9 did a huge one on that, but I mean, even more likely that Omega could be a Force sensitive clone, seeing as not only she's genetically modified, but
I'm just thinking, I would have believed Luke going in exile because Mara Jade died more than what we were told.
Yeah, yes. I don't know. Dude, anything's better than what we got. Anything. Anyway.
I guess to wrap up the cloning stuff, I definitely think that could be a massive possibility.
Yeah.
That we find out that Omega is force sensitive. It'll be curious. I'd really like to see if that happens, kind of the lead up to that and why the Kaminoans would try that. Maybe they were just fascinated with the Jedi. Obviously, they've seen them around at this point.
Yeah.
Maybe they have
I guess
the DNA of Jedi Master Sifo Dyas.
Oh, who knows? Who knows? Maybe. But yeah, I mean, lots to speculate on. You know, if any of you guys listening want to send us your theories on Omega or anything, you know where to send them. Just look in the description and all our contact info's down there. But yeah, other than that, do you have any last things about this episode you want to bring up, or are we good?
I think I pretty well covered it all. I'm still very interested in this show. See where it's gonna go. I hope it's not too much filler. It's always very exciting. There's a lot less characters to have stories about than the original Clone Wars series, so hopefully they can keep it fresh, and we'll see where it goes.
Keep it interesting, yeah, definitely. Cool. Well, thanks for coming back on the show, man. We'll catch you in the next one. All right, and if you guys have not left a review yet, it would really help us out if you could leave a nice 5 stars on the Apple iTunes, the Apple Podcasts, whatever it is, or our Podchaser. If you've gone to Podchaser before, you can leave a nice review there. Even just 1 or 2 sentences as an actual review on the show, just to let people know that this Star Wars podcast is cared for by us, who put a lot of work into giving you guys some Star Wars content to listen to on a weekly basis. Helps us out a lot, and it gets more listeners kind of flooding through the gates. So if you can do that, that would be a solid. And we also want to hear your thoughts on the Bad Batch every week. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're listening to this a couple weeks down the road. Feel free to just send in an email, tweet, tag us at SW Escape Podcast. All the relevant info to get a hold of us is in the description of this episode. And as always, it's a non-profit episode. We'd love to upgrade our gear on the show at some point in the future and might be campaigning later down the road. But for now, it's a non-profit, and any donations that you have, please send them to World Vision, where people could use that money a lot more than we can right now. But again, best way to help us out, leaving a great review. And if you guys haven't checked out the Star Wars VR pinball review, give it a go. If you don't know anything about VR, you might find it interesting. And sit down with us for watching Ewok Adventures with our lovely new commentary tracks. Those are always a good time. May the Force be with you guys, and we'll see you next time on Star Wars Escape Pod.